Hello everyone, welcome to A Clear Perspective. I'm Serene. Today, let's start with the origin of the coronavirus. The Wall Street Journal published an exclusive report on May 23rd. Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee also released a report saying that there is significant circumstantial evidence that the outbreak originated from a leak at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, WIV. Afterwards, we'll briefly discuss how the Israeli-Palestinian ceasefire was achieved. Finally, we'll talk about signs of U.S. troops moving into Taiwan, which is infuriating the CCP. We'll start with the Wall Street Journal report. According to a previously undisclosed U.S. intelligence report, 3 researchers from the Wuhan Institute of Virology fell sick in November 2019 and sought hospital care. There are more details in this report than a Department of State fact sheet that was released during the final days of the Trump administration. The fact sheet only said that several researchers at the lab became sick in autumn 2019 with symptoms consistent with both COVID-19 and the common seasonal illness. So what are the important new details revealed in this report? It disclosed the number of researchers, the timing of their illnesses, and their hospital visits. One person familiar with the intelligence said that it was provided by an international partner but needs further investigation and additional corroboration. Another official confirmed the information that we had coming from the various sources was of exquisite quality. It was very precise. What it didn't tell you was exactly why they got sick. Why did the US reveal the existence of this report? One reason is that the World Health Organization WHO is about to hold a meeting to discuss the next phase of arrangements for the retrospective investigation of COVID. So the U.S. intelligence report is clearly a reminder to WHO. The U.S. has hard evidence at hand and they should not attempt to cover up for the CCP again. A few days ago, the U.S. House Intelligence Committee provided Fox News with another report with extensive evidence that the outbreak of the virus may have been caused by a leak from the WIV. The report mentions that the Wuhan lab was conducting dangerous research on coronaviruses without following necessary safety protocols, risking the accidental outbreak of a pandemic. Also, the report pointed out that in fall 2019, several researchers in the Wuhan lab were sickened with COVID-19-like symptoms, and that the Chinese military was involved with the Wuhan lab. In terms of content, this report is similar to the investigative report released when Pompeo was in office, except that there is more information on the possible funding of WIV research by U.S. academic institutions and the calls for an independent investigation. We see that there is now a growing consensus from both U.S. officials and the general public that the virus originated from the Wuhan laboratory. Of course, just because a virus originates from a laboratory does not necessarily mean that it was artificially produced. But at least there is enough evidence now to launch a transparent, independent investigation into the virus origin through a joint international effort. Next, let's talk about the Israeli-Palestinian ceasefire. Behind the scenes, a diplomatic war between China and the United States is taking place. It's all about power and influence. For example, the official Chinese Communist media reported that the ceasefire was led by Egypt, facilitated by China, but obstructed by the United States. Is this really the case? The reason Israel agreed to a ceasefire is really quite simple. One is that Israel has essentially achieved its strategic goal of destroying most of Hamas' military capabilities and making it incapable of launching a large-scale attack on Israel. Second, the United States exerted strong diplomatic pressure. After all, the United States has been a strong supporter of Israel in both their arms supply and UN diplomacy. At the same time, Egypt is a reliable guarantor. The CCP has basically nothing to do with everything. To avoid a worsening and escalating conflict, Biden said, "We've held intensive high-level discussions hour by hour, literally Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, and other Middle East countries, with an aim of avoiding the sort of prolonged conflict." Biden has spoken with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu 6 times over the 11 days since Hamas attacked Israel. On the 20th, Egyptian President El-Sisi gave important assurances that Hamas and other militant groups would abide by the ceasefire agreement and would not initiate provocations. Under these circumstances, Israel agreed to a ceasefire. In light of all of this, doesn't China's state-controlled media's reporting on the ceasefire look silly? The official China media report said that Egypt played a leading role in the ceasefire negotiations. The Egyptian President El-Sisi ordered 2 security delegations to enter Israel and the occupied Palestinian to guarantee a ceasefire. This is the CCP's way of manipulating the public, omitting facts and distorting the truth. In reality, Egypt promised to send 2 delegations into Israel and the Gaza Strip to prevent the ceasefire from being disrupted. It was done to preserve the ceasefire, not the course of the ceasefire. There are multiple incidents where Hamas provoked Israel, only to suffer in the end. Hamas displayed their suffering to the world, assumed the victim role, and then demanded international aid. When Hamas recovers, they will attack again and repeat the cycle. As we all know, Hamas started the war with Israel, but after only 3 days of recent fighting, Hamas realized that they were losing and requested a ceasefire, which Israel rejected. Someone mocked online, "You say when to start, but I say when to end." In other words, the only reason the war didn't stop for 11 days is that Israel didn't want it to stop. It was Hamas who was hoping for an immediate ceasefire. The CCP has been calling on Israel to ceasefire at the United Nations. It tried 3 times to pass a joint statement, all of which failed. Moreover, CGTN, the overseas channel of the CCP's state broadcaster, broadcast a program on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Israel's embassy protested that the CCP promotes blatant anti-Semitism. It tweeted, "Anti-Semitism has shown its ugly face again." China's state-run media had to remove the program to bring a sense of peace to the situation. In reality, the CCP welcomes more chaos in the Middle East. The more chaos, the better, as it will help keep the US in check and reduce the pressure in the Indo-Pacific region. From this perspective, the CCP's call for a ceasefire is only to preserve Hamas' strength, so that Hamas can continue to stir trouble in the future. It was not done to preserve peace. If Hamas is destroyed by Israel this time, the CCP will lose an important troublemaker for the US in the Middle East. In a word, the CCP wanted to show its power, but only ended up damaging its relationship with Israel. The CCP's only gain was perhaps further to deceive young Chinese nationalists with its misleading reports. Let's talk about the news on the Taiwan Strait. News of US military presence in Taiwan has been circulating in the Taiwanese media. Some anonymous Taiwan soldiers confirmed to a Taiwan media that a large number of the U.S. Security Cooperation Brigade officers and soldiers were stationed in Taiwan long before the recent wave of the pandemic intensified in Taiwan. The groups stationed in Taiwan covered all branches of the military, and their mission included observing the testing conditions of the bases under the Taiwan Army's Joint Arms Battalion and assisting combat training. The U.S. Army has 5 active security cooperation brigades, each with about 600 officers and soldiers, primarily responsible for training partner countries to learn new combat strategies, techniques, and procedures. In particular, the U.S. Army's 5th Security Cooperation Brigade has been assigned to the Indo-Pacific Command since March. It will continue to travel to Indonesia and the Philippines in April and May to assist the local armies to learn new combat strategies, techniques, and procedures. But so far, neither the U.S. nor Taiwan has confirmed or denied this. Why is this news sensitive? It is because the CCP has always claimed that it is a red line that cannot be crossed, and that the day the U.S. troops enter Taiwan is the day a war will break out. In September last year, the CCP's media mouthpiece, the Global Times, published a high-profile editorial with the headline, "U.S. troops backing Taiwan, that would mean war." In fact, this is not the first time that the U.S. military entered Taiwan to train Taiwanese troops. Last November, the Navy Command of Republic of China confirmed that after the active-duty U.S. Marines have arrived Taiwan, they will begin training Taiwanese Marines in assault boat and speedboat infiltration operations at the Zuoying Naval Base in Kaohsiung for 4 weeks. This is the first time that Taiwan officials have publicly confirmed the entry of U.S. troops into Taiwan for military exchanges since the U.S. ceased recognizing the ROC in 1979 as China and started referring to it as Taiwan. Of course, some may argue that this is just a short-term act by the U.S. military for tactical training, not a long-term military presence in Taiwan. So it does not count as crossing the CCP's red line. But in fact, this is a gray area for the U.S. military in Taiwan. The regular rotational training system is a symbol of a long-term relationship. The only difference from the CCP's red line is that U.S. troops did not carry any weapons, especially heavy weaponry, which gave the CCP an excuse to avoid going to war right now. Last year's U.S. Marine presence in Taiwan was under the Trump administration. This year, the Security Force Assistance Brigade's presence is under the Biden administration. So we see that, at least in this crucial affair, Biden has followed the Trump administration. I believe the U.S. and China are on the precipice of a war. Once both countries reach a tipping point with no room to maneuver, there is no turning back. Lastly, we would like to remind our viewers that our platform may be restricted on social media. We would like to recommend the YouMaker platform to everyone. Our videos are available on YouMaker. Please subscribe, and we hope to see you there. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you next time.